Hey, Glenn.
Good morning, John. Long time no see.
Yep, I'll put my video on. Ooh. I can't turn on my video apparently.
Give it a couple minutes. I think they're still queuing everything up.
Yeah, how's everything going?
Fine. Yeah, we were on the verge of going back to hybrid in-person meetings, and then the numbers started to escalate again. And of course, we're just back to virtual for who knows how long. So it's different.
John, you can try restarting your video again.
Okay. There I am. All right.
Great. And we are we're live on YouTube, John, just to let you know. We stream all of this. It's all, and
Always wanted to be a YouTube star.
exactly.
This might not be where you're going to become that, John, but welcome regardless. Nice to see you.
You have no idea what I plan to say.
It's exciting.
It's good to see you, Amber. I'm not sure from a technological perspective how this is going to work, because I have two computer monitors, and when I go to share my screen, I'm not sure which one is going to share.
It will prompt you.
I think the clerks should answer that. I never do that. I'm always just running the meeting. I think it's on the main screen that you are interacting with, though. You're going to hit share screen there, but maybe Megan or
John, do you have two monitors attached to one tower?
Yes.
So when you hit the share screen button in your Zoom, it'll give you all the options of things you can share. And so you'll highlight the screen that has your presentation on it, and then you'll hit share again.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll try.
Do you want to practice right now before we get started?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Hey, Jenny.
Hey there. I'm also happy to share my screen if you'd like, and
Oh,
flip
there you go,
through.
right there. I can share that one. Excellent. Okay, I think I can figure this out. So I'm gonna bail out. Sounds good. Mirta, good to see you.
So good to see you. It's like old times, but not really.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think it is time to start our meeting. I think people are still trickling in, but we will go ahead and get started. I'm going to call Committee of the Whole to order. It is September 22nd, 2021. We are still doing virtual meetings, and that is posted on the screen for people watching. If you are not watching but listening and you want to join, you need to go to the City of Missoula website for agendas and meetings, and you can click on that link, which we're now showing you. You can also always contact City Council by sending us an email to council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And you can give us a phone call and leave a message. That number is 552-6012. Sandra, did you have something before I go on with roll call?
Yes, I had to forward John Contos my link. So if someone can rename him, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, got it. Thank you very much. I think I can do that right now. And in the meantime, if you could do roll call, Megan, that would be great.
Anderson?
Present.
Becerra?
Present.
Contos?
Yes, now I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Harp? Hess?
Present.
Jones?
Present.
Merritt?
Present.
Ramos? Cheryl?
Present.
Vasika,
Present.
Von Mossberg. We got an email he'd be absent today.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have, oh, someone?
Wes, you skipped me.
I'm sorry, Heidi. I didn't scroll all the way down. We've got you in.
Heidi is present. Excellent. Thank you. We have minutes from September 15th, 2021. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved, and I will call for public comment on items not on the agenda. If someone does want to raise their hand to give public comment, you need to do the raise your hand feature. Seeing no raised hand, we will continue on. So today we have an informational item only, and that is an update on the Missoula City and County Food Policy Advisory Board. And Heidi, you had referred this. Did you want to introduce this item?
Sure. I think John and Jenny will do a great job filling you in, but we created a new board about a year and a half ago. That's a relatively rare thing. It's been a long time since we've created a new board, and there's been a lot of groundwork done over the last year, and I think John and Jenny will update you on where this board currently is and where they and ask us part of where we want to see them go, and also where they are envisioning going in the future.
Okay, so John and Jenny, go ahead and if you need to share that screen and need more help, just give a
Okay.
holler.
Yeah, so I will go ahead and share my screen. Thanks so much for taking the time to hear from us today. As most of you know, I'm John Dabari, and Jenny Zazo, who is with CFAC, is also joining today. Julie, it's good to see you too. All right, let's make this work. So as Heidi said, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've done over the last year and several months. It's been a really interesting time, as you guys well know. There has been a lot that's happened in this last year. And as Heidi said, this is a brand new board. We've started from scratch and have worked hard to try to intuit from each other what our skills and abilities are and how that can translate to providing good quality advice to the city council and the county commissioners regarding food policy. So I will go, I assume everyone can see the slide?
Yes, looks
Yeah,
great.
okay, great. So as you likely can remember from the time that you created our board, that there are a host of different charges, as it says in the guiding document, that we're supposed to work on as a board, and as we've done that over the last year and a half, it's just an amazing amount of things that have come up in our conversations, and from dealing with nutrition and access for school aged kids to get high quality food, to economic development, to land protection. It's just that it runs this huge gamut. And if just to summarize what's on the screen here, we're looking at trying to address issues associated with access and affordability, nutrition, natural resources and human resources, economic development, and our food system. And when you think about the complexity of our food system, it's kind of amazing. From producers to processing to transportation to distribution to consumption, all of that stuff. So I'm not sure that when I first conceptualized being a part of this board, the range of different things that we would have to think about and try to address and grapple with and then try to get a handle on to try to provide feedback to the governing body. So it's a lot, and we're working hard to think through all of those things carefully and provide good input to you guys. So you likely remember the people that you appointed to the board, but I think it would be worth pointing out that there are a handful of county appointees as well. This is both a city and county board, as you know. We have Jessica Allard, who's with the Food Bank, Jason Mandela, who's with Garden City Harvest, Bart Morris, whom you may remember from a while back. He's a rancher and the Oxbow Cattle Company out along Miller Creek. And I'm thinking Jody, what's Jody's last name? Wills, the Wills Cattle Company, total mental block on that. She's a rancher with her family out in Potomac. So the one thing that I do want to call your attention to on this slide is the fact that there's already, unfortunately, a vacancy on the board. Michael Dorshurst, who's with the City County Health Department, he was a sanitarian there for a long time, not only resigned his position at the health department, but also on the board. So we are in need of an appointment, and you guys can address this however you want, of course, but we do have an alternate, Claire Battaglia, who is the city appointed alternate, and she has voiced interest in stepping up and being a regular appointed member. But I just want to make sure that this gets on your radar, that we'll need to go ahead and advertise and fill that position. And it's really too bad that Michael isn't a part of the board anymore. He provided a lot of good input, had a lot of good contacts, and obviously represented an important part of our food system, and that was health and safety related items. So what have we been doing in the last year and 3 or 4 months? I can't even remember exactly when we had our first meeting now. It's been a lot. We've been very busy, and like you, we've been challenged with doing all of this work in the middle of a pandemic. We've hardly ever met in person, which has, I think, slowed down the pace and depth of our work. I think finally, maybe after this year and this, however many months it was, I feel like, personally, I'm getting to know people more and understand their personalities and remember what they all do and their strengths and abilities and how they can contribute to the board. But I really feel like we could have gelled a lot more quickly as a board if we could have met in person, but obviously that hasn't happened. So, but in the meanwhile, we have done a lot of good work. As Heidi said at the very beginning of this is a brand new board. So we spent a lot of time trying to get to know each other a little bit and put together our governance structure. I'm the chair of the board, and Bart Morris is the vice chair, and Jenny is, I'm not sure, you're kind of in a hybrid position, both quasi staff and member, and Jenny's with CFAC, and she's provided tons and tons of just solid, work related help in getting agendas put together, and she worked on putting together this presentation. So she's been invaluable as well. We spent a bunch of time putting together our bylaws and trying to add to the sort of structure and thoughtfulness of what the board is going to try to approach as it moves forward in time. Let's see what else. Yeah, so I'll talk about our strategic planning efforts in a little bit more depth in the next slide, but we recognized right off that it would be really helpful to have some guidance and some structure around trying to plan for what this board is going to do over time. So we hired Rachel Gwynn, and she worked us through a virtual strategic planning, a couple of meetings, and that was very helpful. Again, because it was all virtual, I don't really feel like there was a whole lot of interpersonal gelling going on there, but it was insightful and provided us a lot of good work that we can use going forward as we plan what we're going to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about that SWOT piece in a second. We both looked not only at the board itself, but also looking at the strengths and weaknesses associated with our food system. We developed a policy project evaluation decision tree to help us when people might come to the board asking for us to work on specific policies. This is a way for us to help evaluate that and decide whether this is whether the proposal fits within the scope of what the board's work is and how we might be able to contribute. We've engaged with a lot of experts because we've realized that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. And even though there's a lot of experience and the ability for folks on the board itself to contribute, there's just a lot of things that we don't know about our food system in the community, and we've engaged with folks in the community to help learn about that. And Jenny's going to talk more about that in a little bit. As you've likely seen, we've prepared and distributed to the City Council and Board of County Commissioners letters of recommendation already regarding certain policies. And we're in the midst of it's not only put together, but Erica Berglund has prepared, and we now have out for, for the community to take a community rapid food assessment survey, which will help us going forward as well. So as I mentioned, during our strategic planning session, we looked at the strengths and weaknesses associated with the board and our food system. And obviously one of the strengths of the board is the board itself. As I mentioned, there's a lot of expertise and passion around working on this issue. And we've, I think, worked hard together to try to understand what it is our charge is and how we can make a contribution. And we also recognize that there's a ton of support in the community around local food and our local food system. And we're going to have to figure out ways of plugging into that support. But obviously, we have funding associated with the open space bond. We have just a lot of restaurants and consumers who are interested in purchasing and eating locally produced food. There's just a ton of support. So we feel really fortunate that we live in a community that recognizes the value of local food and a fully functioning, well-functioning food system. But we also discovered that there are, as I said a second ago, a lot of things missing, not only in our basic knowledge about certain things, but in the voices that are presented at the table. And I've listed a few of those here. We're missing from the board itself a native perspective, somebody who has experience and knowledge around nutrition, people who are experiencing barriers to accessing local food, whether through inability to get to a place or affordability. And there's a lot of folks from the sort of retail service world that also don't have a voice on the board, from grocery store owners to restaurateurs to food processors, all of that stuff. So this was an eye-opening experience as we started working through this, that, even though we do have a lot of knowledge and abilities on the board, there's just a lot of information out there and a lot of perspectives that we don't have and that we need to seek out. And as I mentioned too, we did look at what the strengths are for our local food system and what the weaknesses, and I mentioned a few of those strengths. There's obviously a big support in the community. There are a lot of institutional food buyers, the school district, hospitals, the university who use local food. But there are also barriers and different gaps associated with our food system, and that is trying to address things like market access, food processing, especially with regard to processing of animals, beef and pork, etc. Various economies of scale that just don't exist in a place like Missoula and the rural areas that are providing the food, the local food to our restaurateurs and other places. There's also issues associated with this supply chain. So as I said, this has all been a very eye-opening and interesting experience. There's a lot that I think we can work on and that we're poised and ready to work on, but there's also a lot that that we need to learn about and try to understand how we can sort of affect guidance with regard to providing policy advice to both the city and the county. And I think that's my 5 slides. Is that right, Jenny?
That's right. I can
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
she's going to pick up and take off from here. So thank you, Jenny, for also, again, for putting this together and helping out.
Sure. Do you just want to keep this presentation up and flip?
Sure, why not?
All right.
This is it, right? Slide. Next
That's
slide.
it. Thank you. So as John was saying, the number of seats that we have on this board could never really match the complexity of our local food system. And so we really took that to heart as far as the missing expert voices in some of these areas to round out the knowledge on the board. And so you can kind of see our meeting schedule here over the past year in 2020 to 2021 and all of the different speakers that we asked to come and provide some of their expertise and knowledge. So we had someone talking about zoning, and we had someone talking about SNAP and double SNAP programs. We had subdivision, we had food processing and meat processing. We had the health department, climate ready implementation team, Western Montana Growers Co-op, the biggest distributor of local food in our community, MEP and Mission West, and the Missoula school system, as well as Orange Street Food Farm, which are institutional buyers. How are they sourcing food in the community? How much local food are they sourcing for our schools? And also talking to somebody who is buying produce from a local grocery store perspective. So we felt really energized around each of these presentations, and afterward we were able to, as a board, talk about how policy relates to some of the needs from these different parts of the food system. Next slide. So through all of this work, we have come to define 4 different policy focus areas that the board will be working toward. And so we have economic development, which is business incubation, food processing, distribution, climate resilience, marketing, tax policy, and supply chain. We have land use, which is zoning and subdivision, water irrigation, conservation, mitigation policy, revolving loan fund, climate resilience, right to farm, and agritourism. Access to food, SNAP and double SNAP programs. This also includes WIC and other assistance programs. Grocery stores, farm stands, farmers markets, local food procurement, schools and institutions, houseless population, food bank, food deserts, and health and safety. In here could include the cottage food bill that some of you may know about, and also working and hearing about health department policies and procedures. I think next slide.
I guess the other thing I would add there is that there's obviously a lot of cross knitting of things. These aren't just standalone buckets.
And this slide is kind of talking about our activities going forward, but I did want to say a few things first. So we also have been utilizing food policy resources from nationwide organizations to understand how and when food policy boards are most effective and engage with the needs of the community and other organized groups. how they're interacting with their elected officials, just kind of taking from case studies from across the country. Food policy councils are fairly new and gaining a lot of momentum. In fact, 2 members of our board, including myself, this week are participating in the Power of Food Forum, which is the first conference, it's virtual, that brings together food policy councils and boards from across the country. And it's been a really invigorating conversation, and I look forward to bringing that information to our board. We've also been and will continue to reach out to other committees, groups, and boards that might overlap in certain areas of policy issues that we're focusing on. For example, we went and presented at the Open Lands Committee about the Swatipkane build planning area and talking about ag land mitigation. And from that, we were able to kind of work together and submit a policy ag land mitigation recommendation letter to both county commissioners and city council as one example. We've also been asked to provide input at the county level by county staff and commissioners for the zoning update that is in process currently. And so that's another thing I just wanted to mention. As we move ahead in our work, as John said, we're in the middle of conducting a rapid community food assessment survey. And that is really asking people to talk about where they source their food during different seasons, what aspects of the local food system are most important to community members, and where they see the most opportunities, challenges, and gaps in our local food system. And we'll look forward to sharing the results of that survey with you all. For 2022, we need to start working on our work plan for the year ahead. And part of that is kind of wrapping up what we've been doing in 2021, presenting that to city council and county commissioners. And that's what we're doing today and moving forward into the next year. We'd like to come up with a more robust community outreach plan. How can we invite more public engagement in the new year? And so we'll be kind of developing that sort of this marketing and outreach plan about the board, that we exist, that we're here. And this would be a place to come if you want to provide input into policy recommendations to your elected officials. We'll also be seeking out some expertise in the creation of public policy, just refining, how to write a policy brief, how to take our letters of recommendation a little bit further so that when they come to all of your desks, it's something that you can easily, read, have your questions answered, understand the follow-up process and things like that. And so we'll be reaching out to the university and some other community members who have experience in writing policy. And we're also going to be doing the same presentation to the county commissioners within the month. And so those are some of the things that we have in the near future going on. And the last slide, well, second to last slide before questions. So this is sort of what we'd love to discuss with all of you today. So our current process around submitting policy recommendations to City Council has been so far letters of recommendation. And so we've submitted 2 to date, and that's about the Swatipkane Build Area Agriculture Mitigation Letter, and also ARPA Fund Food and Ag Funding recommendations. For future process, we wanted to talk about how this was working as far as submitting letters of recommendation for you to review. What should the follow-up process be? How would you prefer us to follow up on those letters? And when would it be appropriate that we ask to be on an agenda for a meeting presentation so that there could be a more interactive Q&A time for us to possibly answer questions that you might have that you wouldn't be able to if you're just receiving a letter. So we wanted to discuss that a little bit today. And the last part here is, this Food Policy Board annual update. We kind of thought that this would be a good idea to do annually. We'd love some feedback on that. And I think one other piece of the puzzle is, that we want to be open for a request from City Council if you are needing input on a specific policy issue that relates to food and agriculture. that we are obviously here and open and wanting to be asked to provide input and feedback. It worked really well. The recent request from the county to provide input to the zoning, the current zoning update that is happening and how that will affect agricultural land. So I wanted to maybe open up the discussion, and we can go to the last slide, questions, feedback and discussion around what we've accomplished so far and sort of the process of bringing policy recommendations to City Council.
Great, thank you. And actually, if you want to take the presentation down, I think it helps.
You might have to tell me how to do all of that. Oh, stop share right there. Got it.
Thank you. Perfect. Great. So thank you for that. And I knew this was in existence. I remember setting it up and appointing people, but it's really great to come in and have such a substantive presentation to really flesh out my knowledge. I do have some raised hands, and if it's questions or comments on the queries from the second to last slide, that's a good topic of conversation also. So we'll just go through as people have raised their hands. Amber.
I'm not totally sure where to start with my questions, because I think, you know, as John pointed out to begin with, our food systems are so incredibly complex. But I am really thankful that you guys are doing this and that we have kind of this brain trust working on this issue. And I'm really impressed that that you've identified so many areas of so many people that you need to reach out to and get educated on. I have a thought, and then I guess I have a couple thoughts. I'm not sure I have questions other than things that will get us so far in the weeds that they may not be productive and you may not know the answers to them yet, but I will be very interested to get your updates regularly. You know, I think thinking about the complexity of this, the collaboration's just going to be critical. And so I guess just as you look into that work plan for the next year, just making sure, I'm sure you're already thinking about this, but you know, where you're going to be able to collaborate and where you need to plug in with other organizations. You know, I think about the work that we're doing with Climate Smart Missoula and on the energy and conservation team and on the zero waste, whatever our name is, team that I'm on as well. And we've definitely talked about food waste in there and just, you know, making sure all those parts are talking. I think with food, with climate change, I mean, all of it's so intertwined that that's really important. So I would say, as far as your question around the follow-ups, like I think, you know, I guess it's a judgment call to some degree on what rises to a big enough, complex enough issue that it needs to come to us and not just an email. But I really like, because it is so complex and so important, I really like the idea of getting more regular updates or more interaction than once a year, you know, once you get really, really going on this. So I'll be quiet.
Thanks, Amber. Jordan?
Thanks, and it's great to see this group off the ground and running. I'm really excited about the work you're doing, and it's nice to see both of you. And John, I'm glad that you remain involved in municipal issues. I think the letters have been really useful and helpful, and so I'd encourage you to continue to weigh in that way when it makes sense. I think one of the biggest things to me is having some input from various stakeholders around updates to our zoning code and updates to the growth policy. So we're embarking in a multi-year comprehensive code reform process that will ultimately replace our existing zoning code with a new code. It will likely involve rewriting our subdivision regulations and most likely result in a unified development ordinance that pulls together zoning and subdivision and you know, engineering code and stormwater and sort of, you know, all of the development related code into one code body. And your involvement in that is going to be extremely important, just from a standpoint of making sure that local food is represented, that local agriculture and food security is represented in that process. And I also think on the short term, the community planning, development, and innovation staff have been working on some updates to the growth policy. We are at the 5-year mark on our growth policy, so we have to do under state law, we have to review our growth policy every 5 years. What staff are doing at this time is kind of a really targeted review in order to meet the requirements of state law, but recognizing that during the pandemic, without the ability to gather and have good interactive public open houses and whatnot for the growth policy process, that it's probably best to do a really targeted review followed by a more comprehensive review down, some months down the road. But one of the things that's coming out of that process is a tool, a user guide, if you will, for the growth policy, and that will talk about, among other things, how to settle conflicts within the growth policy. So within our growth policy, we have a number of priorities, ranging from historic preservation to creating livable enhancing livability in neighborhoods, to housing affordability, kind of the focus inward concept. There's a bunch of different priorities, and local agriculture is one of those priorities. But you can't necessarily have local agriculture and affordability and historic preservation and dense walkable neighborhoods in every project in all places at all times. And so how do we prioritize conflicts? When do we prioritize agriculture? When do we prioritize historic preservation? When do we prioritize affordability? And figuring out how to solve those conflicts in the future I think is going to be more and more important. So your input on that, those growth policy updates, I think would be extremely timely and very important.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks so much for that information. Mirta, and I would say we have about 5 minutes left with this meeting.
I think Jordan covered pretty much a lot of what I wanted to point out. One question that I had for you all was, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of interconnected parts that need to be taken into account to move forward with the work that you're doing. So wondering how you're going to prioritize some of that work. Like I'm thinking specifically about, will you wait to have all your data gathered to start thinking about how to move forward? And I'm wondering how you're going to do that while, for example, in the build grant area, the Setupkin plan area, we're seeing a lot of development. So I feel like it's a time sensitive issue that needs to be addressed if you're gonna be able to implement some of the goals that are gonna come out of that data gathering. I'm wondering also if while you're an advisory board and not an agency, if you are part of the agency review list that our planning department uses to get information from stakeholders and those that have a vested interest in specific areas like, food. And I guess lastly, I was just wondering, and maybe this is a question for Jordan or the planning department, but while updating the growth policy as we're required to do, having an overarching goal for food policy, but I'm really interested in seeing how you guys can be most effective at a neighborhood plan level, because I think there are some neighborhoods in Missoula that could really benefit from this policy and guidance on food policy versus some other ones. And so while the growth policy is an overarching policy and guidance tool, I think it would be really important to balance that with specific neighborhood plan updates. So just hoping that you are as engaged as possible and as part of that conversation when the time comes. Thank you.
Great, thanks. This is what happens when you ask council for advice. You're going to get a lot. And finally, Julie.
Real quick, thanks, John and Jenny, for being here, and thanks to all the board members who have put in the time. I'm really grateful for all the work that you guys are doing. I'm really glad that Mirta brought up the aspect of involving this board with neighborhood plans as hopefully those will roll forward. And I had just a quick couple of maybe logistical comments. I would love to see the letters that you guys have put together on the website for this board. And I'm not sure that I'm seeing them there. Maybe I'm just missing it. Just to have some place for those to reside besides our inboxes, which sometimes is not a good place for information to land. But I would say, as far as when to come and update us, I would appreciate when you guys put together a letter of recommendation like the ones that you have. I'd be happy to hear from you at that time so that we could discuss the items that you've brought up.
Thank you, everyone. We are just about out of time, but I appreciate all of the great, first of all, appreciate the presentation today, and it's really fascinating to hear everything that's going on and what you guys are spearheading, and I appreciate all of the input from council. And I agree, I think once a year is not enough, at a minimum twice a year. And then it's just a question of if there are some acute issues that arise that need where you feel it needs to be in front of council. Perhaps a letter or email isn't sufficient. I guess just work with Heidi, you're the liaison for this group. So, and John, you certainly know how it works. So it's great having you as a resource on this council, this advisory board. Is there anything else from anyone else? I hate to cut us short, but we seem to have covered it and we are out of time. And I want to say thank you, Jenny and John, for coming in today and all of this information.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to you guys too, and also special thanks to Heidi and to Josh Slotnick, County Commissioner, their input's been invaluable.
Yes, thanks everyone for having us today.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
the whole will stand adjourned.